And we're live.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is.
The control system, the global control system, wants us to focus on a dot. This is what it does in science with its specializations. You focus on one dot. And if you focus on a dot without peripheral vision, then you don't see how the dots connect. So you're completely in the dark of the bigger picture. You only see one dot within it.
The world is a lie. Nothing is real. The world is a lie. There is nothing I can feel. Mama didn't tell me that the world is unreal. Imaginary story lies and unreal. Through the lies and the truth and fairy tale is not our Prince of Wales. I never know what is real and true. That's why I put truth out of the blue. Never really did. No one really cares that our heart it hurts. This world is a lie. Nothing is real. This world is a lie. There is nothing I can feel. This world is a lie. Nothing is real. This world is a lie. There is nothing I can feel. Nothing in the world will really exist. In universe, reality exists. Recognition and fear might follow that the world is a small. So many things. The earth is the earth. When we want the lies get told in this world. No one really cares. No one really cares, and our heart get hurt. This world is a lie. Nothing is real. This world is a lie. There is nothing I can feel. This world is a lie. There's nothing is real. This world is a lie. There is nothing I can feel. This world is a lie. Nothing is real. This world is a lie. There is nothing I can feel. This world is a lie. Nothing is real. This world is a lie. Nothing I can feel. This world is a lie. Nothing is real. This world is a lie. Nothing I can feel. This is on the bar. Come on. This world is a lie. Nothing is real. This world is a lie. There is nothing I can feel. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
The control system, the global control system, wants us to focus on a dot. This is what it does in science with its specializations. You focus on one dot. And if you focus on a dot without peripheral vision, then you don't see how the dots connect. So you're completely in the dark of the bigger picture. You only see one dot within it.
This world is not what you think it is. This world is not what you think it is.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Connecting the Dots with Richard and myself, Roxanne. Today is, I think, the 25th of September. It is about 4 p.m. in the UK, and we are joined by someone who's got some serious mileage on research and looking into connecting the dots in his own right. We've got CRROW777 with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us, CRROW. I really appreciate you being here with us today to connect some dots.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I'm hoping we're not gonna overload you with questions, but I'll be honest with you, I've got the list of length in my arm here of things I want to ask you. I've got so many dots that I need help connecting. I know Richard does too. I know everyone that's in the chat room just now watching us is trying to go on their journey. And I just want to reiterate to everyone what me and Richard are trying to do here. We're trying to slow down to look at other important subjects that we should be looking into. I think we're all safe to say we're having this conversation based on the fact that we know we're not living on a spinning ball. So with that being said, we're trying to slow down and look into other big important subjects that's going to help us put together the picture of who we are, where we are, and why we've been put here. Because I think we can all agree the deception goes back pretty far. It goes back pretty far, doesn't it, Rich?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of things that we just don't know. Just don't know about. Yeah. Absolutely.
CRROW, for anyone who's watching this that doesn't already know who you are, could you give us somewhat of a synopsis of who you are, what you're about, and what it is you do?
Well, I'm just an average guy who started looking through a telescope, and by chance in 2012, I filmed the lunar wave. I held on to that footage for roughly a year. By then, I'd amassed quite a bit of footage, and I finally, reluctantly, I was a webmaster back in the day. I was not impressed with social media. I knew that censorship was going to follow on pretty quickly, but I opened up a YouTube channel, and the floodgates opened when the 2012 lunar wave hit YouTube. I mean, literally, I had to change my phone numbers. I had to cancel all my email accounts. I mean, it was a flood, but it was a flood from two directions. It was people who were intrigued, and then it was people who wanted to attack, to defend the common way of thinking about this world, which is mostly incorrect.
Yeah. And I think that's the narrative. The common way in which we look in the reality we live in is often very, very incorrect. It's very misleading. And I think there's a ton of things that have been put out there to distract us from what we really should be paying attention to. I know that you'd agree with that as well, Richard. You have things that fly past, and we don't even slow down to even give it any attention at all. None whatsoever.
Yes, absolutely. It's a mystery of what this place actually is. And so many people want to know. There's so many theories. There's so many ideas of what this place actually is. We've been lied to so long about everything. My biggest question is, who do you think is behind this, CRROW? I mean, what's going on? Like, why are we in this position?
I guess I don't directly understand what you're asking me. Are you asking me why we all believe in things that aren't true? If you're asking me how we all got here, that's a good question. I think that remains to be seen. I think it's going to take a generation or two of people like us who are no longer going to accept the mainstream nonsense to get back to probably where we once were, maybe as close as 200-300 years ago. Hard to know, because even history has been jacked up.
Absolutely. Now, CRROW, I've been woken up to this deception just under 2 years now, of this spinning ball deception. How many years have you been woken up to the spinning ball lie? I mean, what's the deal with that?
That's an interesting question, because way back in about 94, I went into debt. In my whole life, I'd only ever gone into debt like that for a car, but I did that to get an 8-inch robotic telescope. And it wasn't long, probably a year, maybe two, before I realized that all the Hubble images, I think it was the end of the 90s, we started really getting Hubble images. And I realized you can't come close to that. And that's when I started questioning. But here's an interesting thing that I wasn't even aware of. Jason and I did a show with Jungle Surfer. I don't know, it's been quite a while now. And before we went on the air, he mentioned, you're aware that within a month of you posting the 2012 lunar wave is when the flat Earth thing kicked off. And Jason and I, our mouth dropped open, and we went back, and there have been other people now who have gone back to research. It's true. So it goes to show that something like the lunar wave can get enough people looking and questioning the mainstream narrative to all of a sudden, really realize that things are not as they've been told. But that's a true thing. The Flat Earth movement kicked off within about a month of the posting of the 2012 lunar wave.
You know, that's crazy too, CRROW, because I was just telling Roxanne, I was deep into, you know, aliens, hardcore. And I didn't even hear the two words together, flat earth, before in my life. And when I saw the lunar wave, I didn't know who you were. I didn't know nothing. I was just hardcore. I saw it in the alien group, you know, and like I was mentioning, I was really hardcore ancient aliens. I was, just totally bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And when I saw that lunar wave, I was like, oh my gosh, it's a satellite. You know, it was put here, long time ago. And they show, like the wandering stars around the moon and their, ships landing on and off the moon. And, I bought the whole thing, CRROW.
Well, there's a funny thing about information in my lifetime. What tended to happen was mystery would push the narrative. Aliens are that. Bigfoot is that. All these things are based on mystery. In the modern era, when I hear the word mystery, in the back of my mind, the word BS echoes off. Because in the modern era, a mystery is a thing that's founded on not much of anything, and it never works itself out, because if it did, it wouldn't be a mystery. And so what tends to happen is people who begin to question these things seriously, they come back to common sense. And common sense dictates that everything that's in this world was put here by men or women, period. And I can't tell you what's in a universe, if there is such a place. But what I can tell you is this place is pretty much covered with cameras now. So even if a skeptical mind wants to hold on to these older ideas, there's very few things. I invented a rule, kind of like Isaac Asimov did for robots, but I started to look at that idea, and I made this rule to help prove what NASA has done. They've lied from their outset. They've lied. And here's the rule. In the modern era, anything that can be filmed in high definition will be filmed in high definition. And if you logically work that out, that could almost be a law. And that common sense way of thinking starts to show the amount of nonsense that we've been handed.
Absolutely.
That's a really valid point. With that being said, what do you think would be the main thing we would need to do as a civilization, everyone internationally? What do you think would need to be done to expose the space agencies for the criminal lies that they are?
It's simple. Get back to common sense. Get back to nature. Nature is all there is here. The whole space NASA thing is built on this thing called science, which I don't know if it tried to start on the right foot, but what it is now is it's a perversion. It has no respect for nature, and that's where we come from. That is our mother and father, or any way you want to put it. Nature is all there is here, and what science is seeking to do at this point is replace nature with artificial systems. And so many people in the modern era can't even wake up in the city they live in and tell you which way is east or west. You know why? Because their damn cell phone does that for them. And that sets aside anyone having a clue about a solstice or an equinox. And by the way, equinoxes are broken in the modern era compared to the ancient accounts we have. All these things that people want to question, the whole idea of a sun simulator, these are all valid questions right now because people simply have no idea. So the minute a number of us get back to common sense and start respecting nature again, these lies will not be able to float so loftily in our reality.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well said. My thing is with your experiments and with your research about you inspired so many other people to follow in your footsteps to actually find out what this place is. Is this an ongoing thing with you, or are you still going back out there filming the moon? What's your
Here's the thing. I have a big scope, and my wife is the only one here to help me. She weighs about $110, and I had an injury that I knew was going to need surgery, and I didn't want to do it because I'm not real impressed with modern medicine, to say the least. but I finally got it dealt with. I'm supposed to be able to lift things here within another week. Problem is right now I'm not in San Diego. I'm on the East Coast. There won't be a time when I'm filming in the winter. I don't even know how people can pull that off. And my equipment is so expensive that I don't, I didn't grow up in a freezing environment. So yes, I will be back to it. But problem is where I'm living now, there's stairs, there's steps. My wife is not very big, so it requires me to carry the load just to get the scope out. That's been the problem mostly. But yeah, I'll get back to this. And I'll tell you what, you're right. There are a lot of people who started, when I first posted footage with an 8-inch telescope and a 16 megapixel camera, which is what shot the first lunar wave and so many of those objects, people were simply amazed by the quality of the images. And that's a telling thing too. That's me, some old dude in my backyard with tools that I can afford without a multi-million-dollar budget. So what does that even tell you about our space agencies? It didn't take me long to start telling people you have never seen an image of anything from space. Every image of Earth you've seen from supposed space is provably fake. We even know the artist who did the 2002 one. His name is Simmons, claiming NASA gave him data so he made a picture to look like he thought Earth should. So many of them, the clouds are cloned over and over. It's just, these are logical things. And what it comes down to, it's like the old X-Files show. We laugh about it, Jason and I, all the time because of the clever nature of the mind warping. Even in a simple show like X-Files, it says in the very beginning, do you want to believe? Well, if you answer yes to that question, guess what? You're under the spell. If you want to believe. Do you want to believe stuff or do you want to know stuff? That's what all this comes down to.
Oh, absolutely. And while we're on this lunar wave topic, before we go on to the other ones, I would actually want to just show a few minutes of, just in case people haven't seen it, or when they come into this and they want to see what we're actually talking about when they say lunar wave. Like, what are we talking about, lunar wave? So let me just go over here real quick.
Excellent.
Yeah,
so what he's going to do now is he's going to show you all a clip, and that's going to give you some visual representation for what we're talking about. For those of you that haven't seen any of this before, so yeah, you can see what you see.
All right. Good to go. Yep. So let me just go over here past this, and here we go. And we're talking about like right over here. Just bear with me for 1 second, and I'm going to show some of what his work did. Okay, here we go.
777 footage, we're going to do them in the order they were filmed. And again, my footage falls before or after equinoxes. This is the Holy Grail footage. If I had not shot this particular footage, all footage would have been dismissible by those who want to argue against this being a real event. Just the camera pan and the way that it was shot allowed me to know that it was an actual event, and it allowed me to use a measuring stick against all other footage that I saw, where there was no doubt in my mind that we're looking at something that has gone unreported by NASA, which is not surprising. So here it comes at the bottom. The wave comes in, it goes out of frame, and then catches up to the camera, which has always meant this was never an equipment failure, not to mention that it's an organic wave and digital instruments don't fail that way. Just after the first wave begins, 4 seconds, there is a UFO shadow of some type that crosses the upper left limb. I wonder if that's some kind of a satellite device that is involved in this some way. Here's the second wave, filmed March 9th, 2014. On all my footage, I've been able to measure the angle of the wave, which I present you here. I don't know whether the other scopes were polar aligned or equatorially aligned, so I don't really have the ability to do that. And truthfully, they're also zoomed in, so it would be a bit difficult to understand the orientation of the moon, although I suppose we could look at a model for that night. Okay, here comes the wave. There's wave number 1. And there's the second wave. And this is one of the unusual filmings where the moon is not very near full on that. Here's a wave, third wave, March 14, 2014. on a couple of these, and I've forgotten which they are, I would have to go through again. The waves look a bit different. They look a little more flat than every other filming that I've done, and that's on 2 of the clips, but you can determine that for yourself. And as you can see, after the 2012 filming, they became much more difficult to see, more clear, traveling more quickly. Okay, it's going to come in from the top, and I'll cue you right when it's going to start. I have a marker down on this one. Okay, and it's getting ready to come in from the top here.
Okay,
and there's the first wave. And you can see it bowing around the moon. Much clearer and quicker wave. Here's the 4th wave that I filmed on March 14, 2014. Now you notice the look of the moon changes a bit, and that is due to the way I am filming and how much light is on the moon, whether I'm using my city light filter. There's a few things. So some of them have kind of a more blue look, which indicates I'm using the city light filter because there's a need for that on that particular night. All right, I have a marker down on this one as well, and I'll indicate when the wave is going to come in from the top. And here it comes. There's the first wave from the upper left, and there's the second wave. And that is much quicker and much clearer than if you compare that to the previous waves or even the 2012 footage. Now, this next one is kind of a special wave to me. It was very difficult to see. 4 of us were looking at the monitor because we were filming the eclipse on this night, April 14, 2014. These waves occurred as the eclipse was beginning.
So I'm going to stop it right there. The link will be in the description for anybody that haven't seen this, that want to see this. And just to give you kind of guys an idea on what's going on, and what's like my next question, Crow, is because it looks like after looking at this, it looks like the government, once they got this footage, they use it, they try to use it against you and everybody and try to spin it off like, the moon is some type of satellite that some aliens, put in orbit. And so, like, how did you make of that? Like, and my next question after that is there water up there? Like,
well, I finally, a couple of years ago, I finally came out and said, based on a lot of things, the last thing I used for the evidence to state that it's likely liquid in space was the JFK "We're going to the moon" speech. I took it apart and just showed the nautical language all the way through it. But to get back to your first question, it's a telling thing. The number of people when I first posted the 2012 wave, think of all the things that happened. First of all, I'm attacked endlessly. I mean, brutally attacked. I had no inkling of what was about to happen. I just thought I would be posting interesting footage. That's not what happened. Then within a month, the whole flat earth movement starts. Then within some period of time, Nike comes out with a shoe and names it Lunar Wave. Then a production company comes out, names themselves Lunar Wave. I assume those were efforts to dilute search returns. But even up to this point, there's... what's that rapper's name? B.O.B. B.O.B. puts out a song not too long ago called Stanley Kubrick, I think it's the song, where he uses Lunar Wave, and it rolls up. But what you can see is the intentional obfuscation of the idea of a lunar wave. And the truth is, when I first did this, I knew it was a filmed event. And when I finally realized for sure, undeniably, that it was a filmed event, I knew it mattered. But the response that came on the tail of it let me know that it mattered way more than I even thought in the beginning. And the truth of it is if it matters, it'll stick to the wall. And this is like flat earth. Someone threw a noodle and guess what? It's stuck to the wall. The other day, I had a follower of CRROW777radio.com who's a teacher email me, and he has a hard time because all the nonsense false flag school shootings going on. He knows what's going on, but he can't say a word or he'll lose his job and he won't be able to support his family. But he went in to teach geography one day, and I think he said he had 5 or 6 classes that day. In each of the classes, 1 or more children raised their hands and said, wait a minute, why are you got a globe up there? I thought the earth was flat. So you can see this noodle stuck to the wall. It ain't going away. And so, you know, I think that's really what matters here. Not whether we get it wholly right, but that we've recognized the fault in our stars. And so now people can all go at it any which way they want. And anyone who comes up with something who matters, throw that noodle at the wall, man. If it sticks, a million other people will be all over it. Look what happened with the lunar wave. Look what happened with flat Earth, which may in some way be related directly to people seeing the lunar wave and saying, wait a minute, something's going on here. They started looking up. They started getting back to nature. And it was a very short period of time before all of a sudden people realized what we've been told is not true about this place we live.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. Me and Roxanne, we like to ask people this question because, you know, is this a closed? I mean, your thoughts? Is this an enclosed world? You know, some kind of dome like it depicts in the Bible, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, but this is how I go at it. People who are big into religion like to say, "We told you it's the firmament." They're not wrong. There is something there. I call it a hard, fast barrier. And the way I like to describe it to folks now is if you want to get back to some semblance of what I consider to be accurate, go for the oldest texts in this world. Right now, everyone listening, go get old books and save them. Those suckers are going to be worth their weight in gold in another generation with the censorship ramping up. Don't forget the book Fahrenheit 451, where the firemen end up being the guys who light the fires. They don't put out the fires anymore. They burn books and burn people who are trying to learn. But my point here is the old alchemical ideas, alchemy, for people who don't understand, it's not all this dangerous black magic. Basically what it is, it's natural science. It seeks to do science within what nature will permit, in tune with nature. What they do in alchemy is the closest description of reality that I have ever heard. It's all based on nature, but in alchemy, some of the procedures they do are with a flask. So it's a sealed flask. And they use the idea of 4 elements that everyone's familiar with, which I accept: earth, wind, fire, air. If there's a 5th element, if you want to accept it, ether. I believe all day long ether exists. I think Michelson and Morley proved it, and then Einstein lied about it. But my point here is this is a closed system. Nothing comes in, nothing leaves. And, you know, I guess I don't have a good way to describe it, but I can tell you that this place is designed for everything to go in a big cycle. Like water, the most basic alchemical principle is you can turn water into air. Everyone can do it right now. Go put some water in a pot, put it on your stove, heat it up, and guess what? When the steam starts, you're doing the most basic alchemical principle, which proves the truth of what you're being told. You're turning water into air. And a little while later, that air will turn back into water. And these ideas are that everything here cycles one thing into the other, into the other, into the other, till the end of time. And that is a far more accurate description of this place we live than science with all its, I mean, Jason and I are getting ready to rip apart the periodic table. And I'm going to have to do a lot of research, but there's a book out there called The Universal One, which got me thinking about it again, where that man claims that all of the noble gases are not elements. They're in fact master tones in a system that is all based on one. But to get back to my point, as I started looking a few years ago at what had happened to the periodic table, here I come and find a damn element named Einsteinium. There's your frickin' thumbprint. There's your frickin' lie. Another one called Californicum. Then one named after Berkeley, Berkeleyum or something like this. There's just more lies embedded into these things. And what science seeks to do is make things so damn complex that even when you go to see a doctor, for crying out loud, oh, you got a problem with your foot? Well, you need to go see the foot doctor. Go over to China. There has never been a time, for the most part, until Western medicine creeped in, when a doctor didn't deal with your whole body. And by the way, that same doctor would tell you, you cannot separate food from medicine. Have you ever been to a doctor in the United States and been told that you need to change your diet other than don't eat so much fat or salt? You can see what's happened here. The old Chinese method is closer to alchemy. It's closer to nature. The new scientific way we use in the West, it's a freaking mess. It's a complicated mess. But I'll leave it at that.
Can I just pick up on a point there? We're talking about whether we live in an enclosed system or not. I wanted to know what your opinion is on beyond the 60th parallel. What in your opinion, do you think's beyond that? Do you think they're hiding more land? Do you think?
Are you? So you're asking me the map that we see, is there more than that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Maybe I'm asking what's beyond where we're allowed to go.
Okay, so here's the thing: we can use common sense to get some kind of a foundation to try to have ideas of where to go from here. If we logically look at what's the most valuable thing in the world, we can quickly understand it's land. You can't really make more of it easily, right? So if in fact our map is a lie, which I've proved over and over that it is, not only is the globe a lie, our map is a lie. Anyone can take a Mercator projection, a Peters projection, a Gall-Peters projection, and they're all different, which tells you one thing: you can't trust any of them. They're all a lie. In other words, the continent you're living on, you don't even know accurately what the shape of your supposed continent is.
Yeah,
if these things... Right. If these things are true, then it stands to reason that the most valuable thing, land, there's probably areas that we know nothing of. And since we understand that places like supposed Antarctica, which is going to be keyed to all this, this idea of the lies that have been told, is guarded by something like, and I always guess at this number, I think it's 52 nations, maybe it's 57, I forget. They're guarding, they're patrolling the supposed border of Antarctica. Well, why? What are they hiding there? And not only that, people can go back, look at the Admiral Byrd nonsense or those films from the 30s and the 50s where they supposedly sent people down there. My short answer after that long response is yes, it is very likely there are land masses we know nothing of, if the assumptions we have made before that are correct.
Nice. Thank you for that, my darling. Thank you. Rich, I wanted to ask... CRROW, I think we were discussing before, we really wanted to try and pluck out some things that you, CRROW, think we should be looking at as individuals, as researchers, as people that are on our own pursuit of truth, as we all are. We're all on a pursuit of truth. In this messy haze of disinformation, fake news, you know, because we all know what happens when you type in flat earth. No, it's nothing to see here. It's nothing to see. It's just disinformation. It's all videos that have been put out to try and destroy the truth that's trying to be moved forward. What would you say the three most important subjects?
All right. So, by the way, it doesn't matter that search engines are doing that because someone already threw the noodle and it's stuck to the wall. So they can try all they want until we're in a complete police state. It's going to do what it's going to do. But I would point out that one of my early ideas when I realized what the lunar wave was is if I can get people to question the definition of the moon, then they should question everything else. Well, look what happened. The flat earth movement came out of that questioning. Here's what I can tell people. I've said for a long time that the equinoxes do not resemble. Every time you're told there's an equinox, it's a lie. Not only is it a lie, when you start to break down what an equinox is supposed to be, none of it resembles the old descriptions. And truly in this country, like we were just told, an equinox went by, the fall equinox, the so-called Silvergate in ancient texts. It's actually going to happen on 3 days in the United States, depending on your latitude or your longitude, from I think the 25th to the 27th or something like that. In other words, an equinox is wholly dependent on where you are in the world. But this is what I will say. If there are people out there that want to make the next big discovery, something maybe bigger than the lunar wave, look at the sun. The sun is going to be the next big breakthrough. There are people showing that they have patented artificial sun technology. They're making all these claims, which need to be vetted out. But here's what I can tell you. When we had this last full solar eclipse in the United States, I finally came out after filming every eclipse in modern history and said the moon plays no role in a solar eclipse. The moon plays zero role in a solar eclipse. And what did they do 45 minutes before that big full event? They started spraying the skies. And it wasn't just here where I was. I got emails from everywhere in the United States saying that planes were spraying across the ecliptic chemtrails to obscure it. And the ecliptic is the path of the sun and the moon. And so they're working overtime, aren't they, to hide. So you want to make a big discovery, watch the sun. The sun is key to everything. The sun is why we have life here. The sun is why a plant grows. So get over your nonsense that some preacher told you that that's devil worship or whatever you want. Get over it. The sun is what it is, and it makes everything life possible here. I'm not asking you to worship it. I'm saying study it, because it is key. And during that last solar eclipse, what happened, and this is ironic to say the least, is the people who were good at filming and knew how to film, like me, did not overexpose the sun so that we had a good view of the sun. But the amateurs who weren't familiar with how to do it, they overexposed the sun, and lo and behold, there was another body off to the right which looked like a miniature version of the eclipse, and it was not a lens flare or anything like this. There were enough versions of it that the camera movement proved, like the lunar wave, it was a filmed event. So I'll add that. The next big thing is the sun, folks. If you want to change this world in the way the lunar wave did, film the sun.
Oh, wow. Well said.
Yeah, that was a question. See, that's why I love asking these questions, because I end up coming out of the question going, right, okay, I wouldn't have thought that. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I think that kind of that goes part and parcel in what we're trying to do here, just with connecting the dots. We're trying to work out.
I'll add one more thing.
Please do.
A person stuck in belief is going to have a difficult time changing the world, even if they have the evidence in their hand. You have to let go of believing things. You have to let go of what your 6th grade teacher told you, what your college post-grad professor told you, what your preacher told you, what any semblance of this world we have grown up in. Throw it all away. Throw it. You don't have to ditch it for life, but while you are examining things, get back to common sense, get back to nature. And you don't need, it's like Gilligan's Island. We all grew up watching Gilligan's Island. What did it teach us? Well, if there's anything scientific, the professor's got to answer that, right? If there's a rule that's got to get made, the skipper's got to do that. And by the way, the rich guy, he's just rich, so he does whatever the hell he wants. And by the way, the girls are there to look good in dresses and shorts. This programming stuck. We don't need a damn professor. We don't need a damn rich guy. And the skipper's there to man the boat, okay? The rest of us can go out and challenge our reality with common sense. And what comes on the tail of that is often surprising. Just to add that.
Nice. Have you ever there's a lot, I don't know if you've seen footage of like them taking pictures of Venus, because I think when you were talking about focusing, people have that assumption that these stars and the sun and moon are so far away, and they were like, they say, it's out of focus, and you clearly see, like, it looks like you're looking in a swimming pool and there's water up there.
Right.
Have you seen that too as well?
Well, I started doing that some years ago. I call it defocusing. You can overfocus or underfocus. And what I started, that was part of the lead up to me saying space is likely liquid. Because if you take any bright star or so-called planet, which I do not accept, they're luminaries is what they are, and you take them out of focus, you'll get the exact same pattern as a pool with a light in it at night. It's the exact same thing. And Venus is an interesting one. By the way, it is the complete representation of the faith of Islam is all around Venus, just like Christianity is all around Jupiter, just like Judaism is all around Saturn, and part of the modern woes that we face, because in the modern era, Saturn, the idea of Saturn is restrictive. So here we all are trying to expand, and we got these Saturn ideas trying to put their thumb on us and crush us down and censor us. But that's a whole other tale. But yes, the defocusing is a big deal. But I will point out, someone just commented this morning on my YouTube channel about a clip I put up years ago, the moon. And he said, hey, man, you must have a hell of a camera. That's quite good focus for over 250,000 miles away. So there's an individual who got back to common sense. Really. So at one point, I went out, and here's the biggest attack that was ever levied against me is when I said Pluto exists at Disneyland, and that when NASA was showing you at the Pluto flyby was complete cartoons. And what I did is I took my images of Jupiter, which they claim is 400 to 500 million miles away, and showed how much better my images of Jupiter were than theirs of Pluto when they were claiming they were only 7 million miles away. The attack from that was brutal, The Daily Mail in the UK picked it up. Then Gizmodo picked it up. The Daily Mail picked it up. Pretty soon, Hoagland, the NASA shill, Richard Hoagland, got in, calling me a CIA shill and other things in a Newsweek interview I did. The point is the response often tells you how close you are to the truth. But there's my example of common sense being brought to bear. Do I really have a camera and a telescope in my backyard that can zoom in accurately on craters of something over 250,000 miles away? If you want to believe that, I've got a bridge for sale in the desert that I'd like to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They believe it.
Of course they do, because they're convinced that only the professor can answer the science questions. I started there. All these problems I kept finding with my telescope, I thought, well, it's me. I'm wrong. I don't know enough. Clearly, I'm the idiot in the room here, so I'll just keep my mouth shut. And as it went on, I said, wait a minute. I can figure out anything just like any other human being in this world. And I began to realize every human being can add something to these conversations. And again, throw it against the wall. If it sticks, there's going to be millions of other human beings who will grab it and do what they can do. So it's not even like you got to be the best of the best. You just got to recognize that there's a there. And then if there is, in fact, a there, all these other people who have all these other abilities will help, take the ball down the field.
Absolutely. But you know what, right. I have a question though, because I know you can't do everything, all by yourself, CRROW, but we have a lot of researchers out there and a lot of people who want to give to this community and want to do some things. What kind of research that would you like to see other people do that's not actually being done right now, CRROW?
I'd like to see large groups of people go at the equinoxes based on the ancient descriptions and based on the idea that we know the map we have is nonsense. See, what the equinoxes are claiming is that the sun comes to 0 degrees declination and the whole world gets a day of balance. This happens twice a year, fall equinox, the silver gate, and what used to be called the Golden Gate, the spring equinox, which the Golden Gate Bridge is in fact encoding that name for the spring equinox, the Golden Gate. The problem here is that we discovered that not only when they announced the equinox is it a lie, that we can't possibly figure out at this point the movement of the sun and moon or the shape of a map that would allow what we see to be true. These equinoxes, there are towns that are like a few hundred miles apart where one has an equinox and the other doesn't, and they're near the equator. None of it makes sense. A lot of people want to say, oh, of course not, because there's a sun simulator. Well, that's great. Go out and prove it. We've seen the patent. We know the patent exists. We know that you've got a foundation to work from. But here's my point. Go at the equinoxes, go at the solstices, and go at the sun. These are the foundational precepts that every religion ever in this world were built on. What we call them has been hidden with words like Easter. Well, why is it called Easter? I'll tell you why it's called Easter, because at the equinox, the sun sets in the east, rises in the east, or rises in the east, due east. Passover, it's because supposedly the sun is passing over the equator at that point. But we all know that the globe model we've been handed is nonsense. So what truly did all these things mean in a natural science to these people before science got a hold of all these texts and did the translations into English, which is a bastard language, by the way. English is going to be the language of the world here shortly, but it's a bastardized language. Doesn't even retain the ancient ideas of gender. Anyone out there who speaks Spanish or a Latin-based language will understand that gender is foundational to the idea of language. English doesn't have it to show you what's going on. But to cut to the chase, look at the equinoxes, understand them, equate them with what's actually observable, and relate it to the ancient ideas, and then focus on the sun. That's the big game right now.
Excellent. I'm so pleased you touched on language, because it's one of my biggest gripes. Since I've been on my pursuit of truth and on my journey, I've become so aware of so many things that I was not previously aware of. And I've noticed in trying to vocally convey that to other people, where my conscious is being expanded, my language is not expanding with it. And I feel incredibly restricted when I'm trying to, you know, verbally convey things, and actually move through my journey of pursuit and trying to level that up each time. You touched on language and with the word Easter. Rich, I remember you had a question you wanted to ask CRROW about the wording with maritime bits and pieces, didn't you?
Well, that's I mean, he would have to, that would be a whole nother show, a whole nother topic, because there's a lot of things that we are excited about, but it's the laws. And the only thing I can say right now is either go to, you know, CRROW777 channel. There's so many things that we don't know about the laws between the UK and the United States. We don't know anything about laws, you know. And we had a couple of questions, and I didn't want to kind of go over the allotted time that we had, but the question was, you know, the difference between natural law and common law, you know. And
okay, so let's just quickly address these things. I can only address them from an oblique fashion because I don't know enough to tell people things that are going to matter. They need to get to the people who do this full time. We just did a series on law, which is 3 or 4 parts. You can go to CRROW777 Radio. By the way, CRROW777.com is probably a government agency trying to defame me. My site is CRROW777Radio.com. So yeah, they got that. But here's my point. The only law that a living man or woman is truly subject to is natural law. And I can prove it. We're going to be born on the day we're born, and we're going to die on the day we die, and there ain't no change in it. That is natural law, and by extension, common law is in that vein. In fact, the law that we've been convinced matters is basically a form of admiralty law. People have other words for it. And what it is there's 2 sets of languages going on. The language that you and I are speaking now that we think we understand, which we actually don't, and then what lawyers get taught, which they don't, many of them even understand. But it basically creates legal fictions. And the reason legal fictions are created is because by universal law, the living man or woman cannot be compelled or forced to do anything. If they are, that violates universal law. So what they do is create legal fictions, and for most of it, we're convinced to do these terrible things to ourselves, like make ourselves jailable or, you know, pay taxes, any of these things. But to get back to the idea of language, which Roxanne started with, here's a great example. When I was first trying to describe what the lunar wave was, I made a huge mistake because I didn't have the language to describe what I was seeing, and I called the lunar wave a hologram. Huge mistake. As a matter of fact, to this day, I'm still dealing with the fallout from having used the word hologram when I should not have. So it didn't take me long to realize I'd made that mistake. So I changed to facade, and that was the same problem, just restructured. So I learned my lesson. You know, I made a mistake. I made it twice. Third time, I guess it's 3 strikes and you're out. So now what I basically say is the moon is not a rock in space. Probably generates its own light, and it should be correctly referred to as a luminary. It's almost certainly magnetic. The sun is electric, and these are the natural ideas. But at the time, you can see what language does to you, because we're so used to having prepackaged language ready for anything. Well, here's this thing. There is no language for it, you know, unless you want to talk to NASA. They'll tell you clearly it's atmospheric disturbance. At one point, I got tired of that too. So I did a clip that said, hey, man, there's this thing called depth of field with cameras. So you're telling me that a few miles away from me in my atmosphere, there's a disturbance that's in perfect focus, yet I'm focused on a thing that's 340,000 miles away. My plane of focus, according to you, is 340,000 miles away. Of course, it's all nonsense, but there's the counter argument to all that.
Oh, wow. And like, well, the question that my wife actually brought up, she told me to ask you, was this high idea of a natural person, with all these test babies going on, and there's all this crazy scientific stuff. What is a natural person? I mean, you know, what?
I guess so. In the language we use, we would all assume we know what a natural person is, right? It's a person somehow from nature. But you see, if we were using Black's legal dictionary, and a person's a whole other thing, isn't it? A person is a thing you do not want to be by Black's legal dictionary definition. But look, I think what you're getting at here is the basis for what I say a lot these days. Science seeks to convince you that it can do all these amazing things, man. We can go to Mars. Let me tell you something. I'll eat my sandal the day we go to Mars. I will eat my sandal on camera the day we go to Mars. It ain't happening. The day that the president has a red button that can actually destroy the world, I will eat my right sandal, having already eaten my left sandal because I'm so wrong. You've been convinced that science can do all these amazing things. And the truth of it is a lot of it's nonsense. You started by talking about test tube babies. So I'll ask everyone listening, has anyone ever seen a test tube baby? Has anyone ever seen cloning going on? Have you witnessed it with your own eyes? Well, let's use some common sense here. So my bet is that if we go scrutinize these ideas, we'll find what we find with almost everything, problems. And the minute you begin to find problems, when the problems stack up to a sufficient degree, you can start to say this is nonsense. So all the people who want to believe in cloning and test tube babies, go rip it apart. Rip it apart to the foundations and see if you find the problems that make it then questionable. I would just say, because I've never seen a test tube baby. I've never seen anything cloned. I know the story of Dolly the sheep is full of more holes than Swiss cheese, but yeah.
All right, absolutely, absolutely. Roxanne, you have any more questions that we'd like to ask CRROW?
I do actually. I wanted to know, in your opinion, how far back do you think the current deception goes with everything that's going on? Because obviously there's multiple deceptions going on, and there's multiple distractions that are going on to distract people from what's really going on. How far do you think back?
Well, we've done shows to show that our history is a lie agreed upon, as Napoleon is so famously quoted as having said. Whether or not there was a man named Napoleon, that quote is one of the truest things you'll ever hear in your life. Look, if I had to levy a guess, I would say that history is probably 1,000 years closer to us than we've been told, but that doesn't really tell the tale. What appears to me to have happened is the people who have always had all the power, the royals, places like the Vatican, they've had the same problem all the way through history. How do 10 of us control 1 million of us? Okay, that's what's always been going on. So they realized early on that information is key, wealth is key. So they got all the wealth or control of all the wealth, and they went to work controlling all the information. What appears to me to be likely is that there's a history that precedes the history we've been handed that we know nothing of. And if I had to levy a guess, and this is an educated guess, that history was people living more happily, more in tune with nature, with higher minds. That's the history that's been taken from us. It's been replaced with all this nonsense of kings and queens and people God put here to rule over the rest of us, which clearly is nonsense, because if God was real and put people here, you might think those people would have a care for the people they're ruling over, which we can demonstrate all day long. They do not. Money alone shows that. Why is it that 10 people have all the money and 1 million people have pennies? That idea alone demonstrates what we're talking about. But here's the problem with history. You can look at people. There's a Russian guy who's still alive, by the way, who did a lot of work on the timelines using ingenious methods to prove that the history we've been handed is a lie. And his name's Fomenko. Go look up his work. There's like 20 some PDFs that outline what we're talking about here. Jason and I did a whole show on it. So the problem becomes is history is so jacked up. It's like this. Imagine that your children have children. What will they know of 9/11? Okay, that tells the tale. All of us living now know it's complete nonsense, stagecraft. Probably no planes even flew. What the planes you saw were on video. Complete put up, complete false, everything about it. But will your children's children know what we know here today? Or will history have said, those damn Muslim terrorists, you know, those Muslims, they're not even really human beings. They're more closer to wild animals. All they do is wake up every morning and want to rip your guts out. Will that be the history the children know? Or will it be what you and I know? That Muslim people are people just like you and I, human beings. Children want their children to do better, would like to have enough money to pay their bills, no different than you and us. Yet this manufactured terrorism idea and this false event we call 9/11 right now, because we were here, we understand the truth of it. So what those children's children knows demonstrates what's happened to the history that comes before. They just changed the narrative. And with the internet, all the more easy. See, before we had books aren't as easy to change. Let me tell you something. When all information is on the internet, woe will be that day. More information will have been lost on that period of time than any other time, because then the Googles and the Facebooks will control information exchange, and they can change the word murderer to interesting man with the click of a key. So you and I, all our lives, read, this dude's a murderer, this dude's a murderer. Yet our children, they read, this dude's an interesting man, to make a demonstration of it.
It's like a modern day book burning. Like they could just press Control Alt Delete, and they're literally changing meanings of words. You know,
I'm glad you brought that up. You know, I'll tell you the story of how that meme came to be. As many people are aware, Google deleted my YouTube account with almost 100,000 followers, which is also a lie. It's probably 10 times that, if I had to venture a guess. The number of people, my nephew in California calls me all the time to say, I was in a coffee shop and I heard people talking about CRROW777. So the idea that Google is honestly purveying the subs and the numbers. But here's the point. Jason and I put out a show when nobody was sure what happened in Vegas at Mandalay Bay. And we said, this is nonsense. We had a guy on, James Alfred, who immediately showed that the name Paddock is the demon familiar in the story of Macbeth, and that scene opens up. You're in a desert. I mean, it was a 1-to-1 match, and we started showing it. That was the last clip we put up before they shut down my YouTube channel for, Jason thinks that, I thought it was 3 weeks. I think Jason thinks it's a couple weeks. But in the course of shutting me down, the day that they shut me down, if you search CRROW777, you got over 16 million returns. The day, 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it is, that I came back, there were 6,000 returns for CRROW777. To this day, there are only 60 or 70,000 returns on my name where we are. So that tells the tale. But here's the expanded version of what I'm pointing at here. Even when that happened, so many people in my chat rooms couldn't understand whether death had actually occurred. And that was the reason we did it. They used a lunar wave to take down my YouTube channel. It wasn't even a lunar wave I shot, by the way, but that was the third strike. But the previous 2 strikes had to do with false shootings. The last full show we did was the Vegas event. So this proves to you that when all information is being conveyed online, censorship will rule the day, unless people like us decide that that's not good enough for living human beings.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Well, there's a question me and Roxanne like to ask everybody. Go ahead, Roxanne. I'll let you go ahead and do the honors.
Yeah, no worries. I would like you to share with us. It can be any subject you care to mention. Could you tell us something that we don't know, please?
Okay, well, this may be obvious, but for everyone listening who speaks English, which I assume you do or you wouldn't be listening, this is a construct. This language you're speaking and listening to me speaking is a construct, and it's designed to lower the human mind, and it's taking over the world. If you go into Arabia, you will see signs now in their language and in English. If you go to China, you will see the characters from Chinese script, and you will see English. It is the language of the internet. It will be the language that basically tries to homogenize everybody. And as an example of that, when you were in school and the teacher taught you something and wanted to know if you comprehended it, what did she say to you? She said, do you understand? And this is the proof in the pudding. Why do you need to stand under someone as a living human being to make a comprehension? The truth is that once you have comprehension, you should stand over that idea because you have mastered it. You comprehend. And this is one small example, and I've already touched on the fact that gender has been removed, and gender goes to the root of natural science. In this world, for more things to come to be, we need a male and a female, a man and a woman in our case, and this was encapsulated in language. There is said to have been a time when languages in this world, before the history that we are aware of, when language resonated with the object we were talking about. In other words, if I said the word table, the mere way that I expressed that word resonated with the actual physical object we call a table. And this is where we are now with the bastardized English language, which we don't even understand the meaning of, because most of it's Black's Law Dictionary when it gets into any situation that matters. But at the end of the day, it has lowered all our minds.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. One more quick question as well, just while I'm thinking about it. I wasn't really previously prepared and thought about asking this, but I really wanted to know what your opinion is. This is probably a bit random in the bigger scheme of things, but I wanted to know, do first and foremost, do you have an opinion on this QAnon thread? What's your take on that?
It's just poppycock. It's just to burn up your brains, and also to get you to try to believe in the political structure. For everyone listening that lives in the United States, I'll say it for the millionth time. You were taught it in high school, but apparently none of us can remember what we were taught in high school. The voting that goes on in the United States around the presidency has never sat a president, and it's openly admitted. What seats a president is the Electoral College. So part of the QAnon idea, what you see is a lot of people trying to defend the current president around QAnon. That's what it's designed to do. It's just to waste your mind. Let me tell you something. In a recent show we did on central banks, we showed who runs this world. The central banks do. And in 1924, what was that guy's name? Norman Montague. He came from the Bank of England, which was the first central bank that everything was modeled on. And he spoke to all the bankers in the United States in 1924. And anyone can look up this speech from Norman Montague in 24, where he basically says, we will use the political parties in the United States of America to divide everybody and to get them to argue about things that have no importance. He told you the truth right there about what politics is, what political parties are. But I will tell anyone who has half a brain or any concern for reality, there has never been a president seated or the effect of a president seated by this nonsense voting that goes on in this country. It is electoral votes, which is an inside baseball game that gets played. As a matter of fact, the 13 original colonies put this in place, but the state of Rhode Island, which I live in, walked in during the setting up of the Electoral College and said, what the hell are all you other 12 colonies doing? This is a backdoor to power to allow the same people who have always held power to continue to hold power, and they walked out, leaving 12 colonies to put in the nonsense game that we call the Electoral College. But we are so asleep in this country. Millions of us go out to vote for nothing. So there's all that.
Exactly. Stand in line for like 3 hours. Yeah, stand in line for 3 hours waiting to cast a vote, and presidents are selected rather than being elected. At this time, I want to say thank you for everybody that's tuning in the chat room. And anybody in the chat room have any questions for CRROW777, please put it in caps. Let's get that out there now. Go ahead, Roxanne.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, if you have any questions, please pop them in caps.
You guys will have to reiterate this. I'm not looking at the chat room. I'm just looking at the Hangout screen here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You've got massive love in the chat room, CRROW777. Everyone's been showing you love in the chat room. Everyone really appreciates your points of view and where you're coming from. And a lot of people have resonated with it.
Thank you all, and I hope that each and every one of you realizes that everything that ever happened in this world started with one human being having an idea, and each of you are one human being, which means every idea you have could potentially change everything. So I would encourage you all to do what you can in this age of change, in this age of waking from a very long sleep.
Nice.
Yeah, there's quite a few people in the chat room. I want to give a shout out to Paul on the Plane, Richie BFE, AJM, Karen B, also Carolyn Gutterman Day, and Trinity 4, Max DBB, Tommy Rogers, Flat Earth Dude, Kimmy Spreadbra, E10. There's so many names to keep up with.
Paul on the Plane. We got Paul on the Plane, Tommy Rogers, and so many other folks.
Well, that's quite a following you guys have. I'm glad that I showed up, and I'm happy that folks like you that are actually getting out on the street to try to do something have a following like that. But I will give you all a caveat. Whenever you form a group in the modern age, it is easily turned into a target. And in the same way, I never really officially joined Flat Earth for that very reason, partially because I didn't want to inherit a belief system or any of these other things. But I understood from the lunar wave that the minute a group forms around you, they can paint a target on you any day they want and come after you. It's like, is there a globe group that you could aim at? No, there's really not, is there? It's just a belief. So that's what people who want to challenge this world need to be. They need to change mindsets, but be careful about the groups that you form. You need to form them in a way where they're not easily targeted, because we, in fact, I was going to tell you about the modern day book burning. That's what fell by the wayside. So when they shut down my YouTube channel, an old, very controversial YouTube figure who wasn't wrong, by the way, but very controversial and abrasive, named Dave J, sent me an email, and he said, CRROW, I'm sorry to see what's happened. It's a bit like a modern day book burning. And as I came to the reality that my YouTube channel, with God, so many thousands of hours of telescope work, editing, uploading, just all of it, thousands and thousands gone, I sat there all day and I realized Dave J said it perfectly. And I launched the meme modern day book burning. So the hashtag modern day book burning was, when I first began to use it, if I went to Twitter, it would pre-populate for me. Within 2 days, the pre-population of modern day book burning had gone away. And lo and behold, some lady in Chicago had used the phrase modern day book burning to try to dilute its importance. So here's what I'm telling you. All of you will see censorship. If you are a living human being, that should be akin to your oxygen and water being taken away from you. Without freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, you are a freaking cow in a corral being herded. So I urge all of you, use the hashtag a modern day book burning when you see it, because everybody knows that a book burning is wrong and it accurately describes what's going on online. And let me tell you something, I launched Whole Hog for a couple weeks at least, if Jason's right, about how much time we were down. And we think so many people complained that my YouTube channel came back, but we're just not wholly sure. And by the way, what we have an email where email actually said, or Google actually said, CRROW777 will never be reinstated because he crossed our zero tolerance policy for hate speech. I was getting ready to take severe action. Someone wants to tell me I engage in hate speech. It's freaking on, because I don't engage in hate of any kind. But anyhow, the modern day book burning tag could be a thing. And all of you are going to witness censorship. It's going on behind the scenes. It's going on in your face. So I would urge you all to stand up and make that meme mean something.
Wow. Yeah, awesome for sharing that with us, CRROW. I've got a couple of questions in the chat room. Tommy wants to know, is today's sun a simulator placed in front of our true sun?
The sun does not resemble the ancient texts. I am aware, and we know for certain that there is a patent on a sun simulator. I've seen video that sure starts to point in that direction, but here's the problem. Do we want to believe in things, or do we want to know things? It's like the lunar wave. You know, I filmed it. People said I did it in Adobe. They said I made that up. And then unfortunately, I filmed the second one. And they said, no, we know you're lying because you're the only dude who's ever done this. Guess what? 30 people, more than 30 people have filmed it now, twice in front of Jupiter. There's 2 Jupiter waves out there. So this is what I'm going to tell you. If you want to know the truth, we need more evidence. We need a common sense foundation to stand on, because I prefer to know things and not believe things. So we know there is a patent for a sun simulator. We know the description of how the sun and equinox works is broken. So there's certainly a there, but now it's time to prove it.
Yeah, Jaron from the Globe Busters, Jaron from Jaronism, I don't know if you know who he is. He suggested that they're just remote controlling, maybe on a balloon, have this sun simulator go over like a base in Antarctica for a period of time, and and we don't know. So
well, I would suggest that that's a dangerous game to play, for the simple reason that things made by men fail. So the sun, there's another thing about language. It's encoded all through the Bible. Anytime you hear the words in the Bible say verily, verily, or very, very. They're telling you flat out they're at the spring equinox or vernal equinox. The word vernal and very have an etymological relationship, and what it's basically used to basically communicate was the sun will come up every morning exactly where it should, exactly when it should, without fail, until the end of time. Things made by men don't do that. My point is the sun is very, a positive word, very predictable. We know it will be where it should, and I would suggest that a balloon in Antarctica doing anything ain't very anything.
I've got another question as well. Carolyn wants to know, can you ask CRROW if he's ever researched into superfluid helium? It is super cooled helium and has very weird properties.
No.
Sorry. Yep, no, go for it.
I walked over the last few words you said.
No worries. She said possibly part of what the firmament is? Question mark.
I haven't looked at this, so I can't say much, but clearly there's something going on with helium. Just a short while ago, one of the people following me in the chat room was pointing out that there's supposed helium shortage, and yet helium rises. So if there's a firmament, wouldn't there be a heck of a lot of helium up there? It's an interesting idea, but I haven't looked at it, so I guess I can't say a lot here.
Okay, and another question from Max DBB. CRROW, how can we change the English language? Can we do anything to change it?
Intent is everything. A man named Dr. Emoto proved this to us when he showed that human intention could be embedded into water. Go look up the work of Dr. Emoto. Proves flat out what a human being can do. You see, we've been convinced that we're powerless. Religion does this. You can't do anything without help. School does this. You can't do anything without an expert. Gilligan's Island showed us this, because without the professor, we can't make a coconut phone. All these things, and it's not true. Human beings have the power to make this place we are. Dr. Emoto was one of the people who showed that it's true. You can embed human intention into water. Everyone listening should look it up. And by the way, next time you walk into a church and see the holy water, you damn well better understand that whoever the man or woman was that blessed that water put their intention in it. So you better hope that person is on the up and up. Right? So I would say that every person can change this place, and language is no different. If you intend to say a beautiful, compassionate thing to a person, your intention goes in those words of being beautiful and compassionate. But on the flip side, if you want to be a complete pain in the butt, you can embed that intention in those words too. In terms of changing the language, that's going to have to happen over time, isn't it? And I'm not sure there's a clear-cut way in my mind on how to even start. It's just, how do you use language? If you want to see change, start there.
Great. Are you all right with me squeezing another couple of questions in, CRROW?
Sure.
Yes, we do. Okay.
Awesome. I've got IGER Television. They asked, how do the southern constellations work on the flat Earth? And is that a distortion of the dome, possibly?
I can't really address that. There's so many models out there. It's part of the reason I don't attribute myself a flat earther, because I don't want to inherit other ideas, belief systems, and models. What I do want to see is exactly what those folks are doing, making models and trying to make something stick to the wall. If I was you, I would look for the model that sticks to the wall and then try to rip it apart. That's what you do. If someone puts forward something that looks good, see if it can hold up to scrutiny. And if it does, then there's something worth taking, with valuing there, maybe.
Brilliant. And one more question from Infinite Loops. CRROW, how much have you looked into Gematria and the coding of everything in the media?
A lot, but I don't use the typical or even the older methods. And by the way, most of old Gematria will be based in Jewish Kabbalah and these ideas. As a matter of fact, a lot of the modern stuff seems to be tied up with the fraud Aleister Crowley, who, in my view, never had one good intention for anything in this world. So many people like to accuse me of having CRROW777 be related to Crowley. I state categorically, I have zero respect for that man, and I have zero respect for any human being who takes such a blatant disregard for everyone else. But Gematria is real. We have 9 numbers. Matter of fact, my next episode on Thursday is going to be all about this. We have 9 numbers and 1 placeholder we call 0. And guess what we do? We go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then what happens? We start over again. That's our world. It goes in cycles. All of the letters we use in our perverse English that we're all forced to communicate with right now also has a numerical value. What I choose to do is always take things to the simplest foundational way I can think about them. So when I think about gematria, I basically fall back to what's ancient, simple numerology, 1 through 9. Every number I see will reduce to 1 through 9, and I have no recognition of 0 in that system. But what it does is it shows patterns and systems, as you stated, in everything that happens in media, in our fraudulent calendar, and everything else about our life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much for asking those questions, everyone. And thank you so much, CRROW, for taking the time out to answer those questions. I know some of them were a bit left and right. There was one other question about censorship and Article 13 and what your thoughts were on the censorship.
So is Article 13 referring to the kind of Bill of Rights Constitution idea? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, over here, that's our freedom of speech. And,
okay.
And we can go with that. Yeah.
So here's the problem. Like all frauds in our life, the government in the United States is a fraud because it's actually a corporation. It's not a government in any way that we think it is. And when our rights for free speech were outlined in constitutions and other places, it's all about the government. The government cannot abridge your free speech. The government, it was playing the long game. They didn't need the government because they knew they were going to have mega corporations. So the censorship is coming from mega corporations. And so basically every rule we have in the United States about free speech doesn't mean dick because it says the government cannot do these things. Well, Google ain't the government. I think we could make the argument that Google is no different than the government because they're both mega corporations, but that's beside the point. The people who made those rules did not protect our rights as human beings because anyone who wrote those things carefully would have said nobody can infringe on your naturally human-born rights. No entity can take away your free speech, but that's not what they did. They played the long game. They made it look like they were defending us, just waiting for the Googles and the Facebooks of the world to gain enough power and the right age to do what they're doing now, which is one of the highest crimes I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. Censorship is no different than taking away oxygen and water from a civilization.
Well said. Well, that's about it for me versus my question.
Yes.
I've got tons more, but it would take me about an hour and a half to go through it. I can't squeeze any more in. I've got too much more things to ask.
Roxanne, I would like CRROW, if you can tell everybody where they can find you, where they can tune into you at. I know you like to say just for less than a cup of coffee, they can subscribe to you. And go ahead and let everybody know.
All right. So here's how it goes. And so people understand why I charge $5 to be a member of CRROW777. Here's why. If you go to my website on the About page, it's all about free speech. I wrote that in 2013. I have a degree in internet technology. I was never any mystery to me what was going to happen with regard to censorship. So my site, CRROW777radio.com, exists to be free of censorship. In other words, there is a free portion that gets posted on YouTube and my site. And then for basically $5 a month, the whole show is available to members. And that is my private server, my private property. And anyone can go to hell who wants to come in and try to censor that. That's why it's set up like this. You can also find me on YouTube as CRROW777, CRROW777. And lastly, Jason and I just started doing a live show on Truth Frequency Radio on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York time, where we do a live hour with a live chat. That's free to everybody. And I will further point out, CRROW777.com is either a government agent or just an evil person who has now for a couple of years stole my web address and tried to make everyone convinced that I'm a Mason, that I'm a Satanist, that I'm all these things, just so that you don't waste your time giving traffic to a jackass. Don't bother going to CRROW777.com. I am CRROW777radio.com.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. We'll make sure all of those links are in the description for everyone. So with a click, you'll be able to get through to one of those lines of communication and get with that information, because
and if you check out some of the videos that we're talking about, if you don't understand that, the links will be in the description as well.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for having me on. I really enjoy doing the grassroots size shows like you guys are. I'm not interested in the big famous shows. I don't really do those very often. I would much rather do this, and you guys were polite and you had a good crowd here. I'm happy to come back. If I have time, I'll do it.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Crow.
Really amazing. We've got so many more questions that we want to go through, so many subjects that we want to delve into and dissect and really look into. So that would be awesome. Thank you so much, Crow. I really appreciate that. And massive love to everyone in the chat room. As I said, the chat room has been full of humility and love for you. They've really resonated with a lot of points that you've raised with us today. So yeah, it'll be super exciting to come back again and go deeper into these subjects.
Say the word, and if I have the time, I will. And just to remind everybody, each person, well, I should say each human being, because I'll avoid the Black's Law idea of what a person is. Each human being in the chat room has the same power as any living human being that ever had an idea. Everything in this world started with an idea from one human being. Each of you, when you quit believing Gilligan's Island, quit believing the religion you were brought up in, quit believing all these systems designed to take your power away, you will understand immediately that each of us forms this reality, and it is done with our minds. And again, go look up Dr. Emoto. He'll prove to you flat out your intention can be embedded water. There it is. Thanks so much, guys. Email me at another time and I'll come hang out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Crow.
All right. Oh, you know what? Can someone email me the YouTube channel link?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. I'll right on that, Crow. Yep.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep.
Thank you.
Easy so much. Yep. And thank you for everybody that's been tuning in and listening in the chat room. You guys have been great. Me and Roxanne appreciate all the love. You guys take it easy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You've been watching Connecting the Dots with CRROW777, Richard Lopez and me. Please hit the notification bell so you'll be notified the next time we go live with Connecting the Dots. And we'll be back later on today with John Smith Globali with an update from the UK Globali tour. So please make sure you tune into that. Much love and respect to you all. Take care.